Hello! Today is my 4-year van anniversary. Normally what I do when this date comes around is I do a little van tour and I talk about the year and I talk about the lessons that I've learned. And this year I want to do something kind of similar. There's not a lot that's different, so I'm just gonna do a quick tour. But then I really want to talk about kind of like advice that I would give to future people who are interested in doing van life after 4 years of doing this. Like, what have I learned? I also spent some time living in a house during this last year, and so there's a lot of reflections that I've had from that. The biggest changes really are in the kitchen, and right now I'm actually defrosting my fridge. So it's actually the first time I've done it in 4 years. I need to defrost the fridge more often. So all my food is laid out on the counter. The biggest change is that I added a knife holder, magnetic knife holder, and then this thing right here to hold some of my food, because I love cooking, and turns out that my pantry, which is here, is not big enough. So other than that, very little has changed. This is a new addition. I now have a light bar. It touches on and off, but it doesn't usually, there we go, that's doing it. I haven't really added much electrical stuff except for this little, I think it was this year, I don't know, maybe it was last year, but I added a cell booster. So right now I have the cell booster plugged in because I am in a spot where there's not really a lot of cell service. Let's go in the back. Pretty much exactly the same as it always was. I now hang my backpacks from here, and then I guess the one major thing I've changed is that I have these lights now that you can't really see. There you go. You can kind of see them. Pretty much the same. It's a short little tour. The van is still doing me really well. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like the van life lessons that I have learned in this last year. As some of you know, I moved into a house in May of 2019, and I did this for a couple reasons. One was I was having a lot of problems with my van, so if you've been following along, you know that my transmission has crapped out a couple times. My alternator needed replacing. I've had to replace the battery. I've replaced a bunch of different hoses. There were just a lot of major things that needed repair, and so I wanted a place to like settle down and do that. One of the other reasons that I decided to move into a house was because I was having a lot of social anxiety and just a lot of anxiety in general that was stemming from living in the van. And I think it's one of these things that people don't talk about very much, and so I really wanted to talk about it because I think mental health and living full-time on the road is a really important topic, because it can really start to drain on you when you have nowhere to go and no stable community. And it was something that I didn't want to address for the longest time, because I was like, no, like that's not me. Like I can live in the van, like I can do it. It's awesome. I love it. So I can do it this way. Oh yeah, this is better. Go. Now you can really see me in the van. It took me a long time to acknowledge that I was having anxiety attacks and a lot of health issues related to the anxiety of living in my van. And what I mean by that is that it's really hard getting kicked out of places. Most of my worst memories of being in the van are related to somebody kicking me out. In my first year of living in the van, someone called the cops on me. Long story short, I ended up sitting on a curb with, a flashlight on my face and 5 other police officers standing around accusing me of breaking into someone's house. I've done a lot of parking in national parks where there's a lot of animosity between the law enforcement officers in national parks and people who live in their vans, and that's a very complicated issue, so I'm not going to get into it in depth here. I've had friends of mine pulled out of their vans, handcuffed, sat on the curb, told they were going to jail. And then parking in neighborhoods is also challenging because you've got people who live there. I cannot tell you how many notes have been left on my dash in the morning where I'm like, yes, I finally got a good spot. It's like kind of secluded, out of the way. Here's a good parking space. And I wake up the next morning and there was somebody with a note on my windshield just being like, can you please not park here? Other things is when I've pulled up in front of someone's house, they would open the door and just say like, you need to leave. You can't park here. In the first year, I was able to really roll with the punches and I was able to handle that. As I got into my second and then third year, it became a part of my psyche that I wasn't wanted. That is really difficult to live with. It's really difficult to live with the thought that no matter where you are taking up too much space and that you are unwanted. It started to bleed into the rest of my life where, someone would invite me to come to their house and I would be like, no, it's okay. I don't want to bother you or your neighbors. Like, if I leave my van on the street, it's going to bother them. I tried really hard to be extremely self-sufficient, only cooking the food that I had in my van and not taking from other people. And, it never really occurred to me before that hospitality is a form of love that you show to another person. In my brain, insane at the time. I had only ever felt like people were offering me things and they didn't want to be offering me these things, that I was taking advantage of their hospitality. Moving into a house and seeing what it was like to live in a home. It was a lot of things, but it really helped me get a handle on the anxiety that I had developed over the last couple of years. What I wanted to shed light on is that it's not always fun and games, and there is a price to pay for having the ability to pick up and leave whenever you want. And I had never really considered that to be a price before. I think that if 4 years ago me had heard me now saying this, they'd be like, crazy. And so I assume there's gonna be some people watching this video who will say, oh yeah, whatever, you're insane. Like, I don't need anybody. And you know, that may be true for you right now, because it was true for me at one time too. Learning about myself, moving into a home and having a stationary place to live. Another thing that it brought up for me was that I was not prioritizing my self-care. I was prioritizing my business and my van. And I put everything, every dollar I had, every spare minute was spent working on my van and this life that I wanted. There was very little time for me to take care of myself. There was very little time for me to be alone, which is something I realize I need. There was very little time for me to care for my body in ways that weren't physical exercise. So, you know, I wasn't eating very well. I wasn't taking care of my hair. I lost about 8 inches of hair. I can show you a picture at some point of like what my hair looked like when I first hit the road versus what it looked like when I got off the road. And that was because I wasn't showering as often as I could, and I was ripping out knots in my hair. Other things, like I didn't have any clothes. Everything I own is in this van, and so I had enough clothing for one drawer. It sounds superficial when you say it out loud, but sometimes having things is really grounding. And I'm not trying to say that I don't believe in minimalism and minimalistic principles, because I wouldn't have moved into this van if I didn't, but I didn't have anything in my life that felt like me. Every article of clothing that I had was functional. It was for climbing or it was for sleeping. I began to notice that when I was trying to go out with friends who weren't climbers, I would feel very uncomfortable doing something like going out for dinner. I felt out of place being with people who were clean. I felt out of place being with people who were wearing makeup, well-dressed. It added to the alienation of me from society. I wasn't welcome anywhere because I couldn't park anywhere, and I didn't fit in anywhere because I felt uncomfortable in normal spaces. All of that adds up to feeling really ultimately and foundationally rejected for who I am by society. I don't mean to compare this to like the privilege struggles that other people have. I understand that as a cis, white, heterosexual woman, I'm not being fundamentally rejected in the ways that some people are, but it felt like a deeper rejection of this person that I wanted to be. And to make it all worse, I was burning out on climbing. Part of my anxiety was leaking into rock climbing, and it was making it really, really difficult to get off the ground. I went from projecting 512s to shaking in my boots, top roping 5.7. If you don't know what that means, basically trying really, really hard things that were pretty hard and scary to doing the safest thing possible and not being able to get off the ground. This video is kind of a downer. I don't really want it to be a downer. There are a lot of really amazing things that I have experienced, and I think that we spend a lot of time talking about the ways living in a van is great. I wanted to take a little corner of the internet, my little corner of the internet, and just talk about something that was kind of difficult and challenging in my 4th year. Moving forward, this van is going to be a part-time vehicle. I want a home. I want a house. I really want a house. That's kind of what's next for me in moving into the 5th year, is that I will probably keep the van and I'll have her be more part-time. I've tossed around the idea of selling this van after all these years. After all these years, I cannot believe it. And if I do, I will probably do another van tour and post it here and let people know that it's for sale. At this time, I'm living in it again, so this is my home for now. But moving forward, who knows? Things are subject to change. If you have been watching from the beginning, all those years ago when I posted my first van video, I think it was the van floors video. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's been a really good ride. Here's to you. And if you're new here, don't expect too many more vlogs. I think I'm moving kind of away from the YouTube platform as like a vlog. It's not really my style. I'm more invested in writing, so you can catch up with me on my blog at whenchicktravels.com, or you can find me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Here's to Vanlife Lessons Year 4. before. Overall, definitely live in the van, but spend more time fostering community than you think you need to, because community is really important. There's a stupid quote that I hate, but it's so applicable. It's happiness is only real when shared. It's Christopher McCandless. Read that book in high school. Anyway, Vanlife Lessons Year 4. Thank you for watching if you've been here since the beginning. Thank you for watching if you haven't been here since the beginning. Here's to another great year. It's been really good. It really has.